Okay, so okay, we'll start. Today we'll start, and mm, uh, today mainly that I thought the talk about the talk regarding about the consciousness from the Buddhism point of view, because the whenever we meditate, whenever we're trying to transform the our thought. So it's quite important that to understand the reality or the nature of our mind or our consciousness. So here normally that when we talk about the mind, so I'm sure they will have a lot of the different view and different idea about the mind. So now from the Buddhist perspective, what is a mind? Whenever we talk about the enlightenment, enlightenment is just a transformation from the ordinary mind to the very extraordinary mind. It's a transformation. So as we can see that the mind change so fast. So the mind changes so fast. So now here the another reason is that also that from the Buddhist perspective, the mind is the one of the main reason to prove the existence of the past and the future life. It says that the past and the future life is the not other than the continuations of the mind. So our mind keep the continuation. So once our mind cannot be destroyed, cannot be created, it will keep its continuation. So that's why when mind keeps a continuation, that's called the past and the future life. So now here comes the one thing. One thing about the mind is that the most important thing is the one we have to understand, that the one thing that when we train our mind, does the mind have any certain limit up till we can train? If you look at the physical body, when someone is training to jump, and someone has to getting the training to do the any whatever the exercise, they have a certain limit that the person can jump. They cannot jump beyond that limit. Maybe they might jump 10 feet, 20 feet, or whatever, but there might be a certain limit. The person cannot jump beyond of its limit. So now here one thing that does the mind have a limit? When we're trying to change, or when we're trying to transform, or when we practice, does the mind have a limit, certain limit up till it can change? So here that is the one question. Now the second question is regarding about the mind, is that when you see when we're talking about practicing, whether really the mind, it's very much depends on the brain, our physical body very much depends. But is this the two entity, like a brain and a mind? Is there the two separate entity, or it's the same? Whether it's the mind is just a part of the brain? So about these two questions, now among this question, now today is the mainly that now I will share about how the Buddhism perspective, how the Buddhism look at this point. From the Buddhism perspective, mind is formless, and the mind is not the part of the brain. It is not a part of the brain at all. Mind is not a part of the brain means the mind is formless, and the mind is not a part of the brain, which means mind is not a part of the brain, which means that the brain can affect the mind. That is the one thing. Second thing is the mind can affect the brain. It is something very interdependent, like a chicken and egg. Chicken comes from the egg also comes from the chicken. So mind can affect the brain can affect the mind. So that's why now the here that that's why in the mind, when we talk about a mind, there are the two labels of the mind. One we call the gross label of the mind, and the what is one other is the subtle, subtle, and the gross. Gross mind is a product of the brain. The subtle mind is not a product of the brain. It can affect the brain. It can affect the brain. So that's why. So now the one very interesting thing about the story of the my master, when he was age around he lived up till the 93, age of 93. When he was age of 90, 91, 92, when it certain like that age, he forget a lot of the things. Even when we talks the maybe few minutes, he don't remember the what I asked a few minutes back the question. He lost a lot of the memories of that. And sometimes he even can't remember that even what he had for the breakfast because he lost lots of memory. But the very interesting thing is that when we come to the philosophy point, he's a very sharp. He can remember all the philosophy point very clearly. He can even when he was age of 90 or 91. Sometimes the philosophical in the Buddhist, sometimes they have a philosophy, some very profound or the very tough points. But I used to ask him when he was age of 90, 91. He can answer very well, but he don't remember things that what I asked few minutes back or what he ate for the breakfast. But this is the one very interesting thing is that now the things that the from the psychology what they call as a conscious, unconscious, subconscious, they're the different labels. From the Buddhism point of view, we say the gross label and the subtle label. When something you have imprint on your very subtle label or the on the subtle consciousness, that will remain. That will remain. Even the you get your body gets changed. Even so when you reach age of 90 or the whatever, so still it will you can remember those things which goes or the which you have imprinted into the subtle consciousness. Now the another thing is that now here is the come the question. That is the when the person die, the subtle consciousness will keep the continuation. Subtle consciousness keep the continuation. So subtle consciousness keep the continuation means that the like when you look at the newly born baby, if you look the cause of the newly born baby's body, it is very obvious that the cause of the newly born baby's body it comes from the parent. But now when you look at the cause, main cause of the newly born baby mind or consciousness, then it's very clear that it comes from it comes from that past life, from Buddhism past life. So that's why that we are having the number one is the deja vu. That's why that we are having that sometimes we lost some so we can experience the deja vu. And the some cases, some I mean the quite numbers of the children's they remembers that their past life. So that's why there is a book called The Children Who Remember Their Past Life that one scientist have been and the talk with the many small children to to see that how they remember their past life, the past life. So that's what now that's why the what I'm saying is that that's why the when the subtle consciousness it keep the continuation. When it keep the continuation, what happened is that that's why the sometimes the kids or the small childrens they have the remembers of their past life. They can remember their past lives. And another thing is that another interesting thing about that what we are having an experience a deja vu because the deja vu mainly comes because of the deja vu comes mainly because we have something that imprints in our consciousness quite since a long back. So that imprints will brings the sum of the memories. So that's what we call the deja vu. Deja vu, yeah. Yeah. Now, about my experience with the kids, my experience with the kid, I met her once. I met several times. I should say several times. One small kid in Taiwan, but he cannot speak English or the Tibetan or what language I know. He speaks Chinese, but my translator was always with me, and he used to translate me. That kid was around 4 years old or like that. So he used to tell the one very interesting thing is that he used to tell that he used to live in the one mountain. He used to live in the one mountain, and he used to say that he used to run that mountain. Then I told him the draw, write down. Then he started the drawing, and one most interesting thing is what most interesting thing is that when he drawing that, then he called that his name was Tibetan name. He cannot speak Tibetan. He told that his name was such a Tibetan name, and he told that he have one other company. Also, that company name also he mentioned that the Tibetan name. That was I was so curious, and because the parents don't take that much as a seriously because they believe that is a small kid, just a 4 years kid. It can mumble and jumble anything what he wants. Yeah. So, but for me, the interesting thing is not that story, the name, because the name is so interesting. Because since that was when I've been very close to him when he was the age of like a 3 or like that. So whenever he see like amongst like us wearing the red cloth, he used to call us as the Omitofu. Omitofu means Amitabha Buddha, Amitabha Buddha. Call us as a Buddha, Buddha. But when he was telling his past experience of telling the name, that was quite interesting to me. That is the one interesting. Yeah, that is the one thing. Now the second thing is that yeah, with my own niece, he was just maybe now reach at maybe age of 3. Me or my brother's daughter, she was very young. When she was 2.5 years old, or when she started to speak, whenever she sees that the picture of my grandma, that means my mother's mother, she always used to tell that is my mother. Face are very different, don't look the same, but always she said that is the grandma. But these all, so that's why the grandma means actually her great grandma. But these are the things that what I'm saying is that they might have some they are the imprints when the children when these look at the small this toddler. So look, I feel like the some of the imprints they bring the quite long back. So how they I mean they do the things. So yeah, that is now how the consciousness, okay, how the consciousness and yeah, or the mind how it travels. Now that's one other thing is that from Buddhist perspective, as I mentioned, the first question whether mind have any limit for the transformation. So here it says the mind have no limit. Physical body, we have the limits. We have a limit that the certain up till the certain we can do. We cannot go the beyond of the limits. Like when you look at the weight lifter, they have a limits up till that they can lift the weight. They cannot go and lift the weight more than the thousands of the pounds. No, they can train and up till the limit. Then they cannot go beyond. Then they try to solve. No matter no matter how they try very hard, they cannot go beyond of that limit. Certain limit. Okay. So now the mind from Buddhism perspective, there is no certain limit. It can go beyond that the limits. Mind. So that's why you can see the people can sometimes go the very mad when they because of the mind something like that they goes a very wrong, very extreme, so they can become the mad. So that's why it's a certain. So that's why the enlightenment is a something like that. One kind of the madness. You go certain the very extreme the one side. So that's why there is a saying, very interesting saying, that the person, the mad person or the crazy person who knows himself or herself are crazy, mad person who knows himself or herself are mad, gone mad, it's very close to the Buddhahood. So crazy person who relies or knows that who are himself or herself become a crazy, now very close to the Buddhahood. They say, but that is a quite interesting, because the thing is that from Buddhist perspective, when you are meditating or the whatever, the mind, when we have the transform. Example that when you're meditating, my personal experience, when I look back on my negative emotions like angers or like that, one time I was used to be the very short tempered. Now, when I see more than the 60%, 70% are controlled, when you look back at it, when I looked at 10 to 15 years back, well, we never thought that I can do like this person, 60 to 70%, I can control it. I never thought that. But now it happens. Now, from Buddhism point of view, it says that 100% when you can control of the anger, that state it called the in the Sanskrit term it called the arhat. Arhat means a more like a enlightenment. It's enlightenment, arhat or enlightenment. That state when you succeed at 100% controlling the anger. For myself, I can see the changes. Not only the changes, I can see that the success. So now the Buddhism point, it says that it can go up till the 100%. Now, but the 100% of the when you're, the eliminating the negative emotion 100%, that is called the enlightenment. So like anger, it's a, from my own experience, I see that the anger is not that difficult. More challenging is the things like more challenging is the practice or the transformation. More challenging is like we call that the self-cherishing attitude, not self-cherishing attitude. That is more like a self-cherishing is a thinking that okay, selfishness. That is the quite tricky, very tricky, because these all the thoughts, the self-cherishing attitude or selfish, these thoughts are very tricky. So sometimes these thoughts are very tricky. Sometimes we don't realize it. This is the as the one of the destructive emotion. Anger is the whenever you generate anger, it will very easy to see that how this emotion it's hurting you. When you generate like an ego, whenever you generate the ego, it's very difficult to see that this emotion is hurting you. So ego is something like you will, when you generate the ego, you will not know that you have generated some of the destructive emotion. Anger, immediately it will hurt you, it will hurt other. But ego or the selfishness, you feel like you are enjoying it, but in the reality you are not enjoying. It's like a sweet coated poison. So sweet coated poison. So ego and the selfish, no. So moments first you started to enjoy, but so that's why. So that's why there is a one very interesting one of the story. There is a one person, and he was born in hell. He was born in hell, and he prayed to the Buddha and told that I really make a lot of the mistakes in my life. So that's why I born in the hell. I realized that I should not think for myself. I should benefit the others. I realized that when I was when I was in the when I was alive, I think too much for the myself. I didn't care for the other at all. I didn't care for the at all. Now, please, Buddha, forgive me. Save me from the hell. I promise myself that I will never think for myself. I will always think the benefit for the others. So he prayed for the Buddha. Then what happened is that from Buddha threw the one rope he threw in the hell and told him that now it's very good. Now you decided to think the benefit of the others, not to think for the yourself. Now what you have to do is that you catch that rope. When you catch that rope and climb up the rope, then you will get out of the hell. What happened is that he caught the rope and he tried to climb the rope through that rope. He was trying to climb that rope. Then the another hell peoples came to the catch that the rope. When the other hell people came to catch that rope, what he did is he shouted and he said that this is my rope. Don't catch it. He tried to kick the other hell beings. So this is something like what's happening in our life. So morning, you might think that, oh, I will think for the other, benefit for the others. I will think for the others, not focus on the myself. But in the daytime, exactly, you will do exactly like the same person. When you see that someone's catching your rope, you will try to push them away. So that is the one thing happening. So that's why they sometimes so that's why this the selfishness and the self-cherishing attitude. It's a very tricky. So that's why that this is the for as a being, as a practitioner, this is we have to look again and again all the time. So all the time our thoughts. So now from Buddhist perspective, it's saying that we can transform. Not only that we can transform, that we can eliminate all this like ego and the jealousy or the anger, like 100%. We can eliminate all this destructive emotion 100%. That state we call the enlightenment. So that state is enlightenment. So now as I mentioned before, that state, that enlightenment can it come in? It is the sudden process or it's the gradual process. There's a two view on it. I say both are right. It can be sudden process. It can be happen in the sudden, or it will take some time, the gradual process. Because the moment when I think about overcome the negative emotion, it's when we have decided, I thought that I should overcome this all the destructive emotion. So it gave me a lot of the strength come into my mind, and I thought that now I can do that. I can eliminate all this destructive emotion. So that's why now here comes the point that the mind mind have a no limit. It can, no limits, and it can transform into the state, such a state that we have never imagined. You never imagine. Just think yourself. When next morning when you wake up without having any destructive emotion, not getting angry, even someone yell at your face for the 20 or 30 minutes. So it can happen. That is something, the transformation. No, I think that then maybe your families or your friend might not believe that that's you. So it can happen. That's yeah. So yeah, things. One time there is one lady. So she was narrating to some of the whole family issue. Then what I told her, what you have the problem. So problem, she told her that whenever she accuse, sometimes with the quarrel with the husband, she never talk. He never talks. He never reply. That's why that will irritate her more. And this is what happened quite a few years back. Recently, one news came in the one news. It's just so amazing. You will not believe. You can search in the Google. One of the Indian lady want to divorce her husband. Reason of the divorcing her husband is that her husband never fight her back. Never fight her back. So that's why she cannot live with such a person like that who cannot fight her back. He never gets angry. That's a problem. Now see that sometimes not getting the angry, not fighting back become a problem. You can search in the Google. That is, I mean, the months back I saw that news, and they could not. The person that could not get the divorce, no, that kind of judge cannot give her the divorce like on basis on that when she said that he is not fighting me back when I fight with him, no. So now see the minds, how the minds, people's mindset. So that's why I'm saying that tomorrow when you wake up and you cannot generate the anger, when you have a no destructive emotion at all, might be it will become the problem for some of your family members. Now, so that's why. That is the something that is the news. When I saw the news, I just certainly remember that quite long back the lady's problem with her husband. So sometimes what is happening is sometimes like that because of the problem here is that when you generate the anger, When you have a lot of the negative emotion, you expect that someone have to act like you. So that's why the Buddha having a lot of difficulties when after he achieved the enlightenment. Because now his mindset is different. His way of the thinking is different. He totally transformed. So that's why he sometimes that he cannot fit in the world. Because how he talk is a different, how he act is a different. For the normal people, that cannot be adjusted because the two mindset, totally different two mindset. So that's why you're saying, I think you have heard that the book called The Man from the Mars and the Woman from the Venus. No? So total different minds said in the Buddha when he came to the world, after his enlightenment, it became the totally different mindset. So that's why what the Buddha did is that finally he dropped his way of the living, his way of the thinking, and he said the one thing: in this worldly people, in the worldly people like you, whatever you say that it exists, I will say it exists. Whatever you say it not exist, I will say it not exist. So that's why in the sea that the Buddha changes a lot of his statements. Sometimes he say yes, sometimes he say the no. Because nowadays no such a statements of the comes from his side. Because now he had to deal with the people, their own way of the thinking, their own way of the attitude. He went like that way. So that's why I'm saying that when you have the enlightenment, total the transformation, when you have the mind get total transformation, when you achieve the enlightenment, when you totally changed, but still you have to live as how the worldly people lives. When you change an environment, even you cannot generate the anger. Someone shout at you, might be you have to act to shouting back, okay? Otherwise, like an act, okay? But when someone shout at you, we shout. That for us, it's not an acting. We shout really with the anger. So sometimes when we shout with the anger, sometimes we cannot control the consequences. When you're acting it, you can control the consequences. You can control the results. When you shout and with the anger, so that's why you cannot control them. That is the anger at so consequences at all. So that is the thing the mind can transform. Only it can transform. Okay, that is the one thing that it can transform. The now the here that the when we're talking about enlightenment is the transformation of our mind. Right now, our mind and our thought have a lot of the negative and the destructive emotions and the destructive thoughts. At the state when you have a no more destructive emotions or destructive thought, that is the enlightenment. So that's why in the one of the great philosopher called the Dharma Kirti, he gave the one example of the state of the enlightenment. He said that when the person reach of the state of the enlightenment, but then that person he will see equally same as the person who cut his finger, who cut his hand, or the person who applied the perfume on his hand. For us, when someone applied the perfume on our hand, we will generate the more love. Person who cut our hand, we will generate the anger. Person who reach at the enlightenment state, he looked the same who cut his hand or who applied the perfume on his hand. His perspective toward these two people will be equally same. He will look without attachment, he will look without anger. That is such a state. Now you imagine the one thing, if you reach like that state, how will be happen? It might be difficult to survive like this in this world if you think. So that is something. So that's why the enlightenment, such as I know, then in this world, as I mentioned before. So before that, the Buddha, sometime he but very difficult to get the fit in this world. Because when he got enlightenment, when he completely he changed his thought, the thinking way is a completely changed, you know. So it was very difficult for him to fit in the young. So that's why the one thing I remember, one thing that the one time I was talking, that's a quite long back in the South India. So India, and he was newly married, and he was having some issue with the wife, and then he was telling me the whole story because he's been at the army. So when he was being in the army, they sent him to the border. So he told me that several years he was the post in the border, and the way he was posted in the border, there is peoples he can interact. So become a little bit like a lack of the sense, or the lack of the some of the capability to deal with the deal with the people, and he could not socialize that well. So that's why his wife always complained her that he cannot socialize with the people. Because he's spending so many years spending in the border area, that Indian border area, because he's serving there. There is no people he can interact. So that's why when suddenly he came into the society, big challenge when he was socializing with the people. So same thing, my example, the same thing that when you achieve the enlightenment, when you change the whole your thought, when you have fully transformed, sometimes when you come to the normal people life, sometimes it may take some time to adjust with it. So that's why the Buddha was. So that's why you can see in the Buddhas that. So that's why when he give teachings, it's very much depends on the students' labels of the thinking. Sometimes he talks of something which exists. Sometimes he will say that, oh, that does not exist. So that's why the mind's a transformation. Okay. So that is the transformation. Now the another thing is that is the something that the one thing still it is a mysterious about that, about the birthmark. Some children they carry the birthmark. Birthmark, how it happens, the birthmark. It is very difficult to find that the reason why they're having the birthmark. Because it's not from the genes. If it comes from the genes, if you look at the siblings or the twins, they should have the same. But sometimes it's not happening, the birthmark. So that's why the birthmark, that's why they said birthmark from the Buddhist perspective. When the consciousness, subconsciousness travel, also they comes with some of the imprints with that with imprints that carry by that subtle consciousness or subtle mind that can affect the physical body, that affect with the birthmark. But still, this is mysterious. This is we can do a lot of the research about that. Still, we are not very clear that how the birthmark comes. From if you look from the scientific point of view, there is not a clear answer that how it comes. Not comes from the genes. We cannot say that it's from the genes. So that's it. Okay, that's the. I mean, this is the some mysterious, and but maybe you can do Google. So some find some answer from Google. So see that the weather, how it comes. Okay, they might have the different. I'm sure they might have a different. I mean, the theories how it comes. Yeah, from Buddhist perspective, it can be related with our subtle consciousness when the from the one life to the another life. So it will get, because the one thing, it's a very interesting thing. It's what happened with my experience with the one my student in Mongolia. That student, his grandma passed away. Mongolia have such a tradition. When his grandma passed away, what they did is that they mark grandma's left hand with the milk. Put the little white milk on the left hand mark, and the left hand. That when the grandma passed away, then my student, after the sometime later, my student's the sister-in-law gave a birth, and the one girl. And she was exactly having the birthmark on the left hand, exactly where they marked their grandma. So they believe that she is the reincarnation of their grandma. That have such a Mongolia have such a tradition, very interesting tradition. They mark on the left hand. So I think that we have to do it more research, or we can do it more. I think if we do it more, like sometimes we should mark. But the good thing is that they mark on the left hand, not on the face. If the kids have to carry the birthmark on the face, it won't look that good, no? They mark on the left hand. So this is the something. Yeah, this is the something. They have such a tradition in the Mongolia. They do like that. So that's why the birthmark is how whether it's whether related to our the past life consciousness. From Buddhist perspective, yeah, that is related. But still, we can do the further research. We can do. Okay, thank you so much. Today we'll stop here. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording.
I wonder what my birthmark is.